Hey everybody, welcome to the Office 365 Pulse. We have the whole crew here today. To be honest, we don't have a whole ton of updates from Microsoft this week, so this one is probably going to be a quick update. We have three categories though. We have things that have launched, we have things that are rolling out, and we have things that are in development. So just to review, launched is going to mean that it has completely rolled out to everyone's Office 365 tenants. So whether you're in first release or not, if it's launched, it's generally available to everyone in Office 365. If it's rolling out, that means that it is going to be rolling out in stages, starting with those that are in first release. So depending on where it's at in the process, you will see it. So some people will see it in first release before others. So rolling out just means it's going out in stages to different people based on where they're at in that process. And then finally, in development means that Microsoft is still working on it. They're working on developing it, but it has not been released yet to first release. So they're either working on it back behind the scenes, the sausage is still being made in the kitchens, or they're working on it in what they call the dog food environment, or very, very limited first release. So that's what it means to be in development. Those are the three categories that we have here. Sometimes we also have things in the canceled category. We haven't actually had canceled for a few weeks now, so hopefully I probably just jinxed us. We'll have something canceled next week now. I'm sorry, guys. Sorry, guys. So let's start out with the ones that have launched. So who's got something interesting that's launched this week, guys?
I do.
Go, Tom, go!
You do. So the one in our launch category this time that kind of caught my eye, and it's not a big thing, but it's one of those little usability tips that always looks really nice when you get to play with it, is now in a modern list or library, they're allowing you to add columns between other columns, where always before it was add column to the end, drag it over to where it needs to be. Now you can actually place it where it needs to be initially. Again, not a big thing, but it's just one of those ones where they're actually thinking about how do people use this, and let's take away those little tiny, irritants or pain points. It's a delight. Ooh, I like that. Delighter. I will have to use that one.
I stole it, but it's a delighter.
No, take credit for that, Jen. No one knows.
It's R&D. Rob and duplicate. Go for it.
I had one that was launched here I thought was cool. This is along the same lines of it's a small thing, but I think for certain people or certain organizations it can be pretty powerful. Basically, it's now out there and launched that when users are sharing a file, and this is going to be through both OneDrive and SharePoint where you'll see this, when they go through and share a file, you're now going to have an additional option that you can choose to share a file and make it undownloadable. And so even if you gave people view access, they'd have the ability to go in and download that file locally to view it. Now you're basically going to have an additional option that you can go through and share a file where it's only ever viewable through the online web portal, and they can't actually download a physical copy. Again, most of the time, and for most people you're sharing with, this probably doesn't matter, but say you're going through a sales process and you're wanting to put out an RFP, but there's some sort of proprietary information in there that you don't want necessarily getting out. Well, you now have the option to go through and send out a document that can be viewed, that they can go through and see, but they can't download a physical copy of. So again, small thing, but I think in the right business scenario, some people are going to be really, really happy to see this one.
Yeah, I think especially when we're dealing, like in our case, with PHI or PII, we may have to share something, but we definitely don't want that residing on people's laptops. Perfect example right there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, two other small ones that I think have come out, well, not necessarily small, but Intune. So if you're an Intune user, they've made some additional capabilities. So if you have Win32 apps, there's some more capabilities of how you can deploy them to Windows 10 devices. So that's a good feature set that's been deployed again too. So if you're an Intune user, I'm sure that's something that you have been waiting for. So check that out. That's fully launched and available. And finally, I feel like we've talked about this many times. This should be rolling off the roadmap. Hopefully this week we should not be bringing it up again. I'm going to ignore it after this week. But live on-demand meetings for Microsoft 365 Teams, Yammer, and Streams is in GA. I feel like they've had it 3 separate roadmap items, and now they've rolled it into one. This baby should be off the roadmap this week. I'm done talking about it. So that's rolled out. Good as gold. It's done. So that's awesome. So that covers kind of our launched category. So now let's talk about what's rolling out. Guys, anything interesting that we have in that rolling out category?
Yeah, so I'm going to actually hop in here, and I'm going to beat Tom, because I'm stupidly excited about this one. So this honestly might be the thing that has the most direct relevance to what I've done traditionally over the last 5-6 years for my job. So this is an Exchange one. So for people that aren't Exchangers like me, this may not be as impactful. But they're actually now starting to roll out their Google G Suite to Office 365 migration tool. So this is actually really cool, and I was really interested when they announced that this was going to be a thing, because I'm sure they are upsetting some partners by doing this. Traditionally, when you're going through and you're doing Exchange migrations, if you commit and do the full kit and caboodle and do a hybrid migration, it's a wonderful experience. You get all the data and stuff's good. But if you're going from legacy systems that are not Exchange, it was a much rougher path for users. You had a much harder time getting information over. Specifically, if you're doing a native migration from IMAP content, which is what the G Suite was considered, you're basically only moving mail content. You weren't moving calendars, you weren't moving contacts, and so that doesn't really work as an enterprise solution. You'd have to give the users instructions on how they could export their calendar and import it, and how many would actually do that, or you'd have to go through the third-party route and go to someone like BitTitan or someone like that that does additional migration tools that you're typically paying $10 to $15 a user to migrate, and that was a core part of their business. Well, what Microsoft has actually done is, because they realize it's so common that people that are on the G Suite, they've basically developed their own proprietary tool that if you're moving from the G Suite services, you can actually use a tool from Microsoft that will do that calendar and contact, and I think notes maybe. But yeah, so so it does calendar, contacts, and email itself. But so again, this is a pretty big thing, because imagine if you're an organization with 1,000 users, if you're paying $10 a user per license, right there you have a pretty big cost just to get your users moved over. And so from coming from the G Suite, I think this is cool to see, and I think it opens up the path for people to move forward. And if this thing existed 5 years ago, I think I would have been using it a ton. So when they first announced it, really, really interested in it. I think this has real implications to save costs for companies and lowers a major barrier for people moving over. So from someone who's done hundreds and hundreds of mail migrations to Office 365. This is really, really cool to see. And again, this is rolling out, so if you don't have it yet, it's coming. If you're interested and you have a Microsoft rep, you can probably talk to them and get in and get some testing going on, but awesome to see.
Well, and I think this is nice, too, in the fact that while you may still have more whistles and bells, say, on a third-party vendor who does this, if this is good enough and you're going to save $700,000, by doing it this way. Yeah, go ahead, run with this one and get it out there. And again, if it's good enough and it does most of the work, you can save a bundle with something like that.
What I think is really interesting too, and this will be some speculation, but I know a lot of early large customers went to the G Suite because Google really heavily incentivized them to do so. And I know from talking to some of them during sales conversations in the last couple of years, some of their limiting factor in moving over was, as you said, if you have 70,000 users and you're looking at a tool that costs $10 a user, you're looking at paying $700,000 to move over. So them going through and investing in this and building it out, I think gives a direct path for large organizations specifically that may have gone to the G Suite previously, that basically their exit cost was so high they couldn't afford to leave. This gives them a very viable option to move off of, which is really cool.
They're not quite locked in as badly as they were before.
Definitely. What's the next one, Tom? What do you think else is in
Well, I'll go ahead and toss out the one for Outlook on the web. They're now gosh, it has been a long week, allowing you to browse your meeting rooms when you're going out and trying to, do your calendar updates and stuff like that, which is really nice because there's always that thing of, well, I want to find a meeting room, but what meeting room fits what criteria, or what meeting rooms are out there, which ones are free for time slot X, Y, and Z. I think being able to do that on the web now, in addition to being able to do that on the client, again, kind of reinforces the whole mobile first, cloud first type thing, and I'm glad to see that it's coming up parity-wise to what we see on the client app on Windows.
It's getting close for me to be able to go back to the web for Outlook on the web and the client to really be able to just have the same experience to be able to use both. And the last one that we have in the rolling out category it kind of speaks to the same thing. It's a little different, but it's in OneNote, and it's the OneNote Windows 10 app that they have. They have a new toolbar so when you're hovering over text, a mini toolbar is going to come up that's contextual that lets you work with the text, and it's funny. One of my coworkers, Julie, she lives in the Windows 10 OneNote app, and I live in the Windows 10 client app. And for the longest time, I kept telling her, no, I win. I like the client better. But they keep coming out with these features that I'm like, you win. So it's starting to be that she wins. So they have this new toolbar that's coming out that's really making, it really is becoming a great productivity tool. So they have some additional features that are kind of coming out, really making it a great tool to do that. So that's rolling out too. So you should start to see that soon in updates if you haven't yet. And then moving in, go ahead, Adam.
Well, I was just going to say, I actually wanted to throw on something to Tom's point that I thought was really cool. If you read into the details of the being able to browse meeting rooms, they specifically call out that you're going to start to be able to search for by location. And I had to do a decent amount of individual or international travel at my old position, which had me going to London, going to Sydney, stuff like that. And I can tell you when you don't, how our old company did meeting rooms is they themed them. So it'd be like, okay, you're now in meeting rooms that are, old band names. You're now in meeting rooms that are names of groups of animals, that are literary works. And so like in London, they had some that were names of Bond films. In Australia, they had them named after beaches in Australia. But not knowing any of those names, it was next to impossible for me to find a meeting room whenever I was at a different location. And so the fact that now through the web, there's going to be a searchable location field where you can basically go through and say, okay, well, I want to see all the meeting rooms in Sydney and not have to know the names and go searching through a list of, with our old company, Jen was there previously. We probably had, 900 meeting rooms, maybe more. And so going through and trying to search for that, not knowing the names of anything, I think that's a really cool feature. And that alone could drive me to the web, at least when I'm traveling internationally, to go through and look for that, which would be really cool.
Nice.
Awesome. All right. Well, quickly moving on to in development. Who wants to start us out with some of the in development features?
So I'll go ahead and actually grab 3 of them here that all seem to be somewhat related to each other. The first one is self-help for the sync client. This is the Get Help option in the Activity Center that enables end users to initiate a support ticket. Fortunately, they allow you to turn it off, which I think is a good thing because I don't believe you want a lot of people submitting tickets to Microsoft for sync issues. But the fact that they're starting to build in that self-help for sync, I think is a really good sign. In addition to that, the second one, which is Incident Deflection for Sync Client, really nice name. Not sure I would have gone with that, but it's allowing you to do what they call in-app resolutions to sync errors to help users avert and solve issues easily. The first one that they're going to be doing with this is if you have an error that says illegal file names not syncing, you're going to see that error in the pop-up box for the syncing. And so it's going to make it a lot easier for people to see how come things aren't syncing instead of just it's stalled out, what do I do? So I really like where they're going with that, and they're going to continue to add these resolutions in the future. I think that's a really, really powerful thing. And the final one, which is, again, somewhat related to the same thing, is they're doing prompt for pending uploads. So if the sync client is running when you're in the process of the computer shutting down for, reboots or standby or stuff like that, you're going to get a notification that says they have pending uploads in the queue. So at least at that point you'll know, hey, I want to wait another 30 seconds or a minute or whatever to get my data up there instead of shutting down, not getting it up there, and then you get angry phone calls because data that you should have had there isn't. So I think those 3 that all kind of touch on OneDrive for Business, the syncing process, I think they're all really good moves to make the whole sync experience work a whole lot better for people without us as IT people having to become involved with every single issue that people run into.
Yeah, I love seeing this too. Windows 10 already did this, right? So if you hadn't saved a document you're going through to restart for updates or something like that, Windows 10 would warn you, hey, you have unsaved files. But it definitely was not aware of what was going on with the cloud. So I think it's cool that they're going through and making it so OneDrive has this same cognizance, I guess, would be the best way to say. Like, it's also aware of what's going on, and I think this is just making it so much easier if you do use a cloud to have the same type of functionality that you'd expect. So happy to see that one. I had two from my side, if you're okay with me hopping in, Jen.
Yeah, go for it.
So I thought this was kind of in line. There's another one at the end we might talk about, but I thought similar to what Tom did. In my head, I kind of see these as going along the same thread of what Microsoft is trying to do. But they're security ones that are actually really, really cool when you look at them and kind of the direction they're going. So the two that I kind of wanted to point out, I both see as ways that Microsoft is trying to make it so that you can use their security and discovery tools to be a more complete solution inside of what you're doing for your company. And so a lot of times, whether your company or agency was going on, when you went in and started adopting the cloud services, Microsoft had their own proprietary discovery and security solutions that worked for there, but that was a piece of the puzzle in the greater overall picture of what you had to do. And so why it was great that you had those tools, it kind of only went so far when you considered that, okay, cool, that's nice that I have that, but I have these 10 other systems I have to manage. So now they're doing two different things that they're working on development that's going to bring the Office 365/Azure AD security stuff to a more commanding position over your security posture as a whole, which I think is really cool, and I think positions them really well. So the first one is they're basically going to allow you to start adding what they call custom assessments imported into the security and compliance controls. What this basically means, if you have your own corporate policies, if you have state laws, federal laws, industrial standards, stuff like that that you know you have to follow, you can actually start importing those policies and those rules into basically Office 365 and have that start to be things that you can follow. So in the same way that right now you can go through and say, oh, I want to be HIPAA compliant. Well, if you are the state of, North Carolina and some law is passed that's only specific to North Carolina, Microsoft's not going to go and develop a whole template for that. But you can go through and upload the standards around that and basically create a template that's specific to that. Or again, maybe not even a law, maybe it's just an industry standard that you have to meet. So again, this is allowing you to take the outside influences and bring them into Microsoft, which I think is cool. And the second one is even more interesting to me. They're basically going to start creating custom native connectors to third-party data to bring it in and archive it inside of your solution. So what this is meaning, saying you have stuff like, social media like Twitter out there for your company. Well, right now, everything that you're doing along data retention and, what you're doing and the retention policies that you create keeps everything with Office 365, but then you have this Twitter account sitting out there that nothing's being archived natively. You have to buy a third-party tool, stuff like that. You're going to basically be able to set up a connector that pulls in all the conversations going on through Twitter or various other forms of social media or third-party data as a whole, and that is actually going to be stored and searchable through eDiscovery and Office 365. I think that is so cool. It's something that they are basically taking on the burden of maintaining additional data for you so that you have the comfort level of all of my eDiscovery related to what's going on with corporate communications can be done through Office 365. I think this is absolutely genius by Microsoft. I think this makes it so that if you are a company or agency out there, you can buy some of the more advanced eDiscovery and security features that may be a little pricey from Microsoft, but really start moving toward a posture of a complete solution to where, hey, I get a court case, I'm going to go and make stuff discoverable and not have to worry about these third-party systems that may not be integrated. I think this follows the lines of what they're doing with third-party systems with Teams and stuff like that. And just from a security standpoint, when I read this blew me away. I thought this was so smart and so cool.
Nice.
Definitely looks cool. Looks like they also have some things going on from the creation of some policies in the compliance center where you're working with your supervisor based on templates to create policies, and so they're working on making it easier. So you start with your supervisor to create a template, and then you're forwarding it on and stuff like that. And it looks like they're working on making that process easier. So that's something that's also in the works. So it looks like there's a couple of things with the Compliance Center. I mean, kind of like Adam said, you kind of look at what they're doing, and it's like, okay, they're going in from a usability standpoint and trying to make a bunch of things easier there. So that's interesting there. And I think the Compliance Center is constantly under construction, right? They're constantly making that one better. I had two things that I thought I'd mention on this list, and I think that's going to wrap us up. But This one I think is interesting because I think it just goes to show that they are listening and watching and looking and seeing what they're doing and trying to make things easier. But one of the things that they have in development is for OneDrive for Business. They are going to allow you to manage access to your files, which means doing things like removing individual recipients, shared links, overall sharing access in the classic UI. And so that would be before you'd have to switch between the classic and modern UI, and you'd have to go into the modern UI to do that. But there are certain reasons that you'd want to be in the classic UI, and sometimes that's a real pain for users to go back and forth between. And I know they want to drive everyone to the modern UI as much as they can, but they also want us to be able to get work done and to get work done efficiently. And so they are bringing that back to the classic UI to where you can manage access in the classic UI. So that is something that's in development, and I am sure those that are waiting for that are probably thrilled to pieces that that one is coming. So that's in development. And then finally, the last one on here, and then I have one that I'm going to mention that's not on the roadmap, but I've been asked about it 3 times this week.
I thought she was going to talk about golden folders.
No. Office mobile apps are going to be available for download for those with an F1 or G1 license. So that's something that they're working on too. So again, if you have an F1 or G1 license, your users are going to be able to get Office mobile apps, which I'm sure if you're looking for that, you're probably very excited about that. We were laughing about golden folders. There is something on the roadmap about golden folders that's actually in air quotes. We don't know what that is, and we all kind of laughed about it, like what in the world? And it even talks about like a color palette and a hue. So we'll keep you informed as we learn what they are. But for now, we just kind of giggled and went on. But the one I was going to tell everybody about, I have literally been asked about this by 3 different people this week. It is not on the roadmap, but it is in user voice. And so user voice is where people will go in and share their feedback with Microsoft. And the request has been, I need to rename my tenant, and my tenant is named incorrectly. We've merged, we've done something else. We need to rename our tenant. Please help us. I don't want to remigrate. What in the world's going on? I need to rename my tenant. How do I do this? And the answer right now is you wait, because Microsoft does not have a way to do it, but there is something in development. And so I'll put that out there that it is in development. It has not reached the roadmap yet, but they do have a user voice intro where they say they are working on a solution for it. So we don't have an answer on when it will be or what it will be, but they have answered in user voice that it's there. So I'm assuming that if 3 people have asked me about it this week, that our viewers might also be curious about it. So I'll kind of share that out there.
I was really excited for the F1 G1 thing. Jen kind of knows this because of what's going on, but I am literally going to present to a state and local government this giant report I've been working on next week, and part of the recommendation I'm giving them is for F1 licensing. So when I saw that, I laughed because, 100% I am going to be saying that during my presentation. I was like, oh, hey, look, it's relevant. So
I love it. I love it. Well, everybody, it's been great. This has been a little bit shorter than our other weeks, but I think it's all really great information. So I love that we've been able to share this with everybody, and we will be back next week with additional updates. So thanks, everybody.